Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be diving into some pretty groundbreaking autism research today and kind of exploring how our understanding of gender is evolving within this field.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. Like we're really challenging some long-held assumptions here. We're going to be taking a look at excerpts from a recent article called "Autism Research: Inclusion or Erasure,"
Mm.
and it really gets you thinking. Let me tell you.
Okay, so at the heart of our deep dive today is a study by Barry and their team, and they were looking at something called sex chromosome dosage. Now, I know that sounds kind of complicated, but
hmm
basically it means they investigated how having extra or fewer sex chromosomes might be linked to autism. So like an extra Y or maybe just one X chromosome.
Right, and they use data from two huge groups of people to do this. Spark, which is a U.S.-based project, and IPSYCH, a Danish cohort. Spark is particularly interesting because it's heavily funded by the Autism Cares Act. So it's closely tied to the Cures movement, which often prioritizes early intervention, sometimes over actually supporting autistic adults.
Oh, okay. So they're kind of coming from a particular perspective, which is important to keep in mind. And then IPSYCH gives us a broader view with data on all sorts of mental health diagnoses.
Exactly. Now, what makes Barry's study really unique is its genome-first approach. So instead of starting with how people behave, they started with their genetic information, specifically those sex chromosome variations.
Okay, so that's where it gets really interesting because their findings actually challenge the female protective effect theory. You know, that idea that females need a higher genetic load to be autistic.
Yeah, exactly. And that theory, honestly, has been pretty damaging. It's led to underdiagnosis in girls and women, for sure. They might be misdiagnosed with things like anxiety or personality disorders instead of, actually getting the right support for autism.
Wow. Yeah, I never really realized that a theory could have such real-world consequences like that. So if that's not the case, what did Barry's team find instead?
Well, they're proposing what they call the extra Y effect. They found that having an extra Y chromosome significantly increases the likelihood of autism. And this could potentially explain why we see this perceived protective effect in females.
So it's not that females are somehow protected from autism, it's that males with an extra Y chromosome might be more likely to be diagnosed. I mean, that completely flips the script.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that autism doesn't fit neatly into this male-female binary. Sex chromosome composition, it really seems to play a crucial role in how autism might actually present itself.
So does this mean we need to change how we diagnose autism?
Well, that's a good question. These findings, they can definitely inform updates to things like the DSM, which is the manual used to diagnose mental health conditions.
But I imagine that's a pretty slow process, right?
Oh, it is, for sure. Think of it this way. Even with strong evidence, like really strong evidence, it can take 5 to 10 years, sometimes even longer, to see changes in how doctors actually diagnose people. You've got expert panels, lots of back and forth. It's all pretty slow moving.
Okay, so while this study is super interesting, we shouldn't expect diagnostic criteria to change overnight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, the article also points out that even when research is like really promising, real world change is often held back by funding priorities.
Mm.
Take the Autism Cares Act, for example.
hmm
A lot of times it puts more money into early intervention and genetics studies rather than research that focuses on the needs of autistic adults.
Right, but it sounds like we also need to make sure that research funding is balanced and it, considers the needs of all autistic people, not just kids.
Absolutely. And there's another big issue that the article brings up, this idea of autism as something to be cured or minimized, which ties back to, some troubling historical ideas about eugenics. It's something we need to be really mindful of.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely something we need to unpack further. It seems like the language used in research often frames autism as a problem to be solved, rather than just a natural part of human diversity.
That's exactly right. And this also ties into the influence of what some call autism moms,
hmm
often non-autistic parents of autistic children, who sometimes kind of dominate public conversations about autism.
You mean they have a lot of sway on what research gets done and how autism is talked about?
Exactly. And sometimes their advocacy, while, I'm sure it's well-intentioned, it can unintentionally reinforce the idea that autism is, something to be eradicated rather than understood and accepted.
So it's like they're saying we need to prevent more autistic people from being born instead of saying, how can we create a world where autistic people can thrive?
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us to, I think, a really crucial question. What would autism research look like if it truly valued neurodiversity
Yeah.
and centered, the voices and experiences of autistic people themselves?
That's such a great question. I'm really curious to explore that more deeply.
Me too. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think
Mm.
it's really essential for understanding how we can move toward a more inclusive and affirming approach to autism research. It really boils down to a shift in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like seeing autistic people not as, problems to be fixed, but as individuals with valuable lived experiences.
Yeah, and that brings us back to Barry's study and its potential impact on diagnosis. While the study itself didn't directly address transgender, intersex, or non-binary individuals, it did highlight this really complex relationship between gender and autism.
Oh, absolutely. By challenging that traditional male-female binary in autism research, the study kind of opens up space for, recognizing the diversity of how autism presents itself across all these different gender identities. And this could potentially even lead to more inclusive diagnostic criteria that better reflect the experiences of trans and gender diverse autistic individuals.
Yeah, because right now those criteria are often biased towards a male standard of autism, and that leads to, misdiagnosis or delayed diagnosis for those who don't fit that mold.
Exactly. And that can have a huge impact on a person's, access to support and understanding. Imagine being told, like, you don't have autism because you don't fit the stereotypical presentation.
Yeah.
Even though you experience the world in a distinctly autistic way, it can be incredibly invalidating.
For sure, yeah. It sounds like we need to push for changes in diagnostic practices, more research that centers the experiences of gender diverse autistic people, and honestly, just greater awareness of the unique challenges they face.
Yeah, we do. And it's important to remember that even a study as, groundbreaking as Barry's still has limitations. As the article pointed out, their findings, they need to be replicated and validated across diverse populations.
Yeah.
And even then, translating those findings into, real world change
Hmm.
is a long and often pretty frustrating process.
Ugh, yeah, totally. It's like we're constantly battling against this resistance to change, even when the evidence is clear.
And that resistance often stems from like this deeply ingrained belief that autism is something to be cured or prevented
Hmm.
rather than embraced and supported.
Right, and that brings us back to the language used in autism research. We need to move away from terms like risk, burden, and deficit,
Yeah.
and start using language that affirms neurodiversity and celebrates the unique strengths and perspectives of autistic individuals.
Imagine a world where autism research, you know, focused on improving access to quality healthcare
Hmm.
and creating inclusive educational environments and promoting, employment opportunities for autistic people. Imagine research that like explored the rich tapestry of autistic culture and identity.
Yeah, that's the kind of research that can truly make a difference in the lives of autistic people. That's the kind of research that can help create a more just and equitable world for all, really.
Absolutely, and that's the kind of research we need to be fighting for.
So what can we do as individuals to support this shift towards more inclusive and affirming autism research?
Well, I think we can start by educating ourselves
Mhm.
about neurodiversity and the harmful effects of these cure-focused narratives.
Okay, and we can support organizations that are, led by and advocate for autistic people.
Yes, definitely. We can also challenge ableist language and attitudes whenever we encounter them, honestly, whether it's in our personal lives
Mhm.
or in the media or even in the research community itself.
Yeah, because ultimately change starts with each of us, right?
It really does. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing that autistic people are not problems to be solved, but individuals with valuable contributions to make to our society.
And it's about creating a world where everyone, regardless of their neurotype, can thrive and reach their full potential.
Exactly. The article also brought up a really important point about the power dynamics within the research community itself. It's not just about the studies that get funded, right? It's also about who gets to do the research and whose voices are actually heard.
Oh, right. You're talking about how autistic researchers are often marginalized and excluded from the very field that studies them.
Exactly. This perpetuates a system where non-autistic researchers are often, speaking for autistic people rather than with them.
Right. And that can lead to research that is, biased, inaccurate, and ultimately harmful to the autistic community.
Think about it. Who better to understand the lived experiences of autistic people than autistic people themselves?
It's just like trying to understand what it's like to be a woman without ever talking to a woman.
Or trying to understand what it's like to be a person of color without ever talking to a person of color.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it really doesn't. So we need to be advocating for more autistic researchers, more funding for autistic-led research projects, and more opportunities for autistic people to share their perspectives and expertise.
Absolutely. When we center autistic voices in research, we're not just improving the quality of the research itself. We're also challenging those power structures that
Yeah.
have historically silenced and marginalized autistic people.
Yeah, it's about creating a more equitable and just research landscape for sure,
Yeah.
where autistic people are not just subjects of study, but active participants in the research process.
And that's a goal worth striving for. Now, the article also highlighted the role of institutional review boards,
Mm.
or IRBs, in kind of perpetuating this exclusionary system.
Right. IRBs are responsible for reviewing and approving research proposals to make sure they meet, ethical standards.
Right, but as the article pointed out, IRBs often have very narrow and outdated views
Mhm.
of what constitutes ethical research on autism.
Yeah, they often prioritize research that focuses on, cures or treatments while rejecting proposals that take a more, neurodiversity affirming approach.
And it's incredibly frustrating, honestly, because it means that research that could actually benefit, autistic people is being blocked by a system that is resistant to change.
It's like they're saying we're only interested in research that tries to eliminate autism, not research that tries to understand and support autistic people.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really crucial point. The language we use to talk about autism matters.
Oh, absolutely. The words we choose can either, reinforce harmful stereotypes
Right.
or promote understanding and acceptance.
And even seemingly small changes in language can have a really big impact.
Yeah, for example, using person-first language, like a person with autism, can
Yeah.
actually perpetuate the idea that autism is, something separate from the person, something that can be removed or cured.
Whereas using identity-first language, like autistic person, affirms that autism is an integral part of a person's identity
Yeah.
and cannot be separated from who they are.
Right. That's a really important distinction, and it gets to the heart of what neurodiversity is all about.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that there's no one right way to be human,
Mm.
and that neurological differences are just as valuable and valid as any other kind of human diversity.
And it's about celebrating those unique strengths and perspectives that autistic people bring to the world.
Exactly. So the next time you're talking about autism, think carefully about the language you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Choose words that promote understanding, respect, and inclusion,
Right, right.
and challenge language that reinforces harmful stereotypes, or perpetuates the idea that autism is something to be feared or eliminated.
Yeah, because the way we talk about autism shapes the way we think about it, right?
Absolutely.
And the way we think about it shapes the kind of world we create for autistic people.
It really does.
And that's a responsibility we all share. Now I know this is a lot to take in, and it can be overwhelming to think about all these systemic barriers that need to be overcome.
But remember, even small actions can make a difference, like educating yourself about neurodiversity and challenging ableist language,
Mm-hmm.
or supporting autistic-led organizations and advocating for more inclusive research practices.
Right.
Every step we take, no matter how small, it moves us closer to a world where autistic people are valued, respected, and empowered to live their lives to the fullest.
And that's a future worth fighting for. And remember, this fight isn't just about autistic people.
It isn't.
It's about creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Because when we embrace neurodiversity, we're not just embracing autistic people. We're embracing the full spectrum of human difference.
And that's what makes our world so rich and vibrant.
It really does.
Yeah.
So let's keep learning, keep challenging, and keep fighting for a better future.
Yeah, together we can make a difference. It's interesting, the article also touched on like the academic world's role in shaping perceptions of autism. It's like there's this pressure to conform to a medicalized view, even when that view doesn't reflect the lived experiences of autistic people.
Right, like they're stuck in this outdated way of thinking
Yeah.
that sees autism as a problem to be solved
Yeah.
rather than a natural variation in how the brain works, you
Yeah,
know?
and that can be incredibly stifling for artistic researchers who are trying to bring new perspectives to the table.
Oh, absolutely. The article talked about how even like research mentors and dissertation chairs,
Yeah.
those guiding figures in academia, often push for that person first language. They're editing students' work to fit that mold.
Right. And as we've discussed, that framing can perpetuate the idea that someday autism can be eradicated, separating the person from who they are.
Yeah, it's a subtle but powerful message, isn't it? Like we can imagine a world without autism instead of we can imagine a world where autistic people are fully accepted and supported.
Exactly. That small shift in language, I mean, it speaks volumes. So where do we go from here? What can we do to shift the narrative and create a more inclusive and affirming research landscape?
Well, I think it starts with questioning everything. Question the assumptions, the language, the frameworks that have historically marginalized and pathologized autistic people.
Right. And we need to amplify the voices of artistic researchers, clinicians, advocates who are pushing for a more neurodiversity affirming approach.
Recognizing that autistic people are the experts on their own lives and experiences.
Yeah, yeah, creating spaces where those voices can be heard and valued, and it's not just about research, it's about everything.
It is. It is education, healthcare, employment, social inclusion. It's about creating a world where autistic people can live authentically and thrive, just as they are.
And that requires a fundamental shift in how we think about autism.
A commitment to neurodiversity
Empathy, understanding, and a willingness to challenge our own biases.
and action.
So what can our listener do? Where do they start?
Start by listening to autistic voices. Educate yourself about neurodiversity.
Right.
Challenge ableist language and attitudes. Support organizations led by and for autistic people.
And remember, this isn't just about autistic people. It's about creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Because when we embrace neurodiversity,
Yeah.
we all benefit. We expand our understanding of what it means to be human.
We create a richer, more vibrant, and more inclusive society.
We open up a world of possibilities.
So keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for a more inclusive world.
The journey towards understanding and acceptance begins with each of us.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and a huge thank you to our expert for sharing their incredible insights. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, take care.